Today I'm going to do something that I've never done on the channel before. I asked you guys what you would like to see, and the majority of you, pretty overwhelmingly, it was about half for a meta discussion and half distributed amongst all the other options. So what I'm going to do today is I'm basically going to make this tier list, and it's a tier list of the meta, and then I'm going to switch over to the Spellslingers client, and I'm going to go through the decks and let you know what you can expect to see from these top tier lists if you're unfamiliar with the strategies that they're trying to do. So it's kind of like a tips, meta discussion, and a tier list video all in one video. So with that being said, I'm just gonna start from the top and work my way down. And how I've thought about this is I just want to go, basically it's just, the tier 1 decks, the absolute best decks is obviously going to be S tier. And then basically S is tier 1, A is tier 2, B is tier 3, and so on. So I'm just going to start with the decks that I think only lose to the ones in that bracket most of the time. Like, it's a card game, there's going to be RNG, there's a lot of variance in card games. So everything can beat everything, obviously, and the gaps between the tiers are not large at all. That doesn't, like, if something's in tier B, that doesn't mean that it can't beat something in tier S. It's just most of the time, because this game is currently fairly balanced. It might be the most balanced meta we've had so far, other than the very first one we had. So the best deck, I think, right now, or the best two decks, I think Domri is way, way, way up there. This is for several reasons. It grinds forever. It can pressure the other decks that are dominating the meta, and I think win at least half the time consistently. And the reason why it's up here is because I think the other best deck, and this is the only other deck in this tier, is Raw. So Domri has always been a decent counter to Raw because it goes wide, it pressures, it has a lot of bodies to absorb the damage from the Chaos Lightnings, which is an insanely big deal against Raw. Whenever I was playing, I considered putting in Pyroclasms a few times, specifically for matchups like Domri, so you can clear the board, your Chaos Lightnings can do more damage. You can just push more because you don't have all these bodies to deal with. But Domri has the benefit basically of having the aggression without having to be Glass Cannon, because he refuels himself with the Centaurs, with his own mechanic where he gets the boars for free. So he just he has this like never-ending threat that you just have to keep dealing with over and over again. And when your opponent falters, then then they win. So that's why Domri's up here. And then Rawl is just able to combo off and have really, really crazy turns. Thing in the Ice is really crazy. The Mizium Monstrosity is really crazy. Chaos Lightning is really crazy. The Jarring Insight and the Warding Flame being very efficient 1-mana spells really pushed Rawl a lot further than he's ever been pushed before. So you're able to just go absolutely crazy. And another major component is the Rooftop Laboratory, because those turns where it gives you 2 extra cards, I mean, he's just able to combo and combo and combo and combo, because you find the Spark of Genius is way more, you find the Mana Surge is way more, and you find a lot more of these 1-mana spells that are now in blue and red that are just really powerful. And so you can just blow your opponent out and there's absolutely nothing they can do about it. And I think that these two decks just have the best matchup spread, and they only truly, I think, compete with each other. Obviously, like I've said before, they can lose to other things, but I think they're sitting on top of the hill right now. Okay, with that being said, the next tier, I believe that these are, I'll adjust the orders as I go and at the very end, but I think Teferi is in this tier. And I think Teferi is in this tier because there's enough traps, there's enough slow now that it can beat Domri, and the negates and the absorbs can really slow down Rawl to where you have a chance, but you have to tweak the Teferi deck to the meta. It can't just be any old Teferi deck. It has to have negates, it has to have absorbs, obviously. It has to have a lot of things with like big defense so you can help absorb those Chaos Lightning. So like the Turtle that's a 2/4, the Acolyte that's a 2/5, things like that. So I think you can, this tier list isn't just how it is. I think how also like how the meta could be if people geared their decks towards these lists that they're going to see. So like if you're in anything below diamond, these ratios are all going to be thrown off for you because you're not going to see people going after the absolute best decks all the time, right? So like you won't see as many Domries and Rawls. You might be like, Logan, what are you talking about? You know, I don't see Domries and Rawls as much as you're proclaiming, but I promise you, when you hit diamond, especially around like the 1800 mark, you'll start running into these decks a lot more. So, and then you're also going to see them with people look up, you know, like deck lists wherever they look it up. I don't think I've ever, the entirety of this game, I don't think I ever looked up a deck list. I've just seen deck lists in the Discord because it warps. I like to keep the game through like my own perception, and it keeps the game a lot like healthier and more fun for me if I don't have like a complete picture. You guys saw that when I made the Liliana reanimation list. Like I didn't go look it up. I just wanted to mess with it and figure it out on my own and like what they're running, right? So that's how I enjoy card games, and I don't need to look up decks in order to be however far up the ladder I feel like going, right? So I think Teferi can be tweaked to handle both of these. I think Domri is still the biggest problem for Teferi, and that's for several reasons. Okay, that is because when you board wipe, Domri could have the worm trap, and so they can just spawn the worm and then finish you off if you're relying on the board wipe, which you are a lot of the time. And then the other reason is because now they're running the behemoth, and now also that land that makes dudes. So basically they have a lot more haste options than they did before, and they can play a creature at the end of the turn. So for those reasons, board wiping doesn't just straight save you. And so they're able to just constantly pressure, which is what sets Domri apart from other creature decks. So I think Angrith is in this kind of for the same reasons that Domri is. I just don't think Angrith does it quite as well. Angrith does a little bit more direct damage, but the cycling, because of his signature card, making things bigger, he sneaks a little bit more. Not as much raw power as Domri, but he's a little bit more, I don't know how to put it, like he's a little more burny, a little more sneaky, but he's still very strong. He has a lot of refuel. He runs the same type of lands, like the Molten one that draws an extra card, or the one that makes dudes, or like they have a lot of similarities, but I think Domri just has the edge, and I think Angrith is easier to contain via like Infest, Pyroclasm, stuff like that. Domri's got a little bit more meat on his bones, right? Maybe not Domri himself, because Domri looks really skinny compared to Angrith, but you know what I mean. So I think the next best like pure aggro creature deck, I think, is Angrith. Let's see, I tried to mix these up so you guys didn't see the order that I had chosen from the beginning. Let's just make this a little bit more clear. I think Ashiok's might be all the way at the bottom. There's so much aggression now. I think it loses to all the control decks. The Nightmare's just not killing you fast enough because they're in the top 15, not the top 10. So Second Sun control decks have a way more time to stabilize. I don't lose to Ashiok with Jace anymore. And I'll get to why that is in a moment, not just because of the Nightmares. I think all the aggressive decks are just way better suited to beat Ashiok than before. Sarah gains health constantly, which mitigates the Nightmares. I'm not saying that there isn't a list where Ashiok could come up, but overall presence on the ladder, I think Ashiok is, it just isn't there. Not that it doesn't have the potential, I just don't think the current deck lists running around, they're just very underwhelming, right? And let's see, to go with Ashiok, I'm going to put Kiora there as well. Like I said before, I think that there is definitely a place for Kiora. I just hadn't personally run into a bunch of them, but I know a lot of people are on like the unstable mutagen spam where like they just keep doing it over and over and over again. Maybe this is too low, like maybe the bottom of B, but so far for sure on the tier list, I think she loses to these four, definitely beats Ashiok, and Ashiok's definitely the worst so far. Let's see here. Another A, I'm going to go with Sarah, because whenever she's versing other aggressive decks, they have a very short window in which they can close the game. And she might even be better than Angrith, I'm not really sure, it's hard to say. because if you don't hit that mark, if you don't close the game soon enough, her ability to just heal herself, the game will eventually be out of your reach. She also has a lot of combo potential now with the Chalice, and they run Mend, so that way they can either heal themselves to stabilize, or they can just start burning you for 5 a bunch. Other aggressive decks don't have as many flyers to compete with the Sarah with, so that's another reason why she's good, and she sets herself apart. Also, her removal spell isn't that great, but you know, it's completely fine for stabilizing. Like, basically she has the ability to stabilize against other creature decks inherently, which is always a bonus, right? That's always strong, and the flyers give her an edge as well. Let's see, I think Jace is about here-ish. Okay, and now this is a very specific type of Jace. This Jace is only here because Snapcaster exists, and I don't know if anyone's played more Jace than me. Not like real control Jace. I'm not talking about the mill artifact garbage from last season. I'm talking about like real control Jace. I got to like 1850, and then I just wanted to stop worrying about it, and so I just switched to Raw to like finish off and get to Mythic. But I tweaked the deck a lot, and I'll show you guys the deck list at the end of the video. But Snapcaster Mage, what it does, something very unique for Jace, and that is if your signature cards get milled, you get to play them still, which is really important, because your opponent has a random millstone or a jarring insight from a Jace messes you up, you still have the chance to come back. And the other more important thing I would say is spamming Second Sun. So people are like, oh, you can't choose which spell it is. Okay, I don't run that many spells in my current Jace list. I don't have any opportunities. I don't have any divinations. The spells are either come from Scepter or they come from the Second Sun, Day of Judgment. So they get targeted a lot with the Snapcasters, and late game, most of the time you have both Snapcasters in your hand, and you can just check which one has the Second Sun. And what this does is it provides way more fuel for the Elemental Masteries without having to clog your deck up with big spells. And then it provides way more burn damage to face, because if you Second Sun's Dawn, then you get Second Suns more. And then the Snapcaster can also just straight see the Second Sun. And it makes the matchup against Sarah almost auto win, because you just have board wipes galore, you have heal galore, and you have burn galore. And I don't ever lose to Teferi. I win like 95% of the time against Teferi, because it's basically inevitable, because they get really low on cards, and I just keep spamming Snapcaster into Second Sun's Dawn, which then gets me more guys, which, you know, Second Sun. So basically I have way more gas than I did before, because I basically have, if let's say I get both Snapcasters on Second Sun's Dawn, I have 4 more giant spells to play, which is 4 more 5/4 sneakers, and that's 20 more burn damage. So you can effectively get 40 burn damage from 4 Second Suns if it works out that way for you. And then the other thing that gives you an edge in control mirrors against Rawls, against Ashioks, and so on, is if Snapcaster sees Elemental Mastery, then every time you play something that's 6 or more, you get 2 guys, and that happens all the time. So the Jace is just a lot stronger now, and I even run Snapcasters in my Teferi list sometimes for that exact reason. But I think Jace, is going to beat everything below him, meaning to the right and down. And I think that he loses most of the time to the things left to him besides Teferi. I just think that Teferi does so much better against Rawl and the Domri. He deserves to be higher up than Jace. But I think Jace does have a better matchup against Teferi than Teferi does against Jace. So, it's a lot of talking, guys. Let's see. I hope this isn't boring. I hope you guys enjoy this, and if you do, please leave a comment and a like, so I know that you guys like this, and I can do these maybe every format after a couple of weeks of like a new set or something comes out, right? So let's see. Okay, Vraska is an interesting one. So Vraska, I think, is in A, even though I never see her, because she can build boards that give Rawl a problem, and the other thing that gives Rawl a problem, especially the current iteration, is removal. And she has Turn to Stone, which is really, really strong right now. But she has the removal between Foul, Turn to Stone, Drain Blood, Ill Omen, if she's going that route, which she probably should in this meta. Infest, so she has the ability to deal with Pyromancer very effectively, Museum Monstrosity very, very effectively, the Thing in the Ice very effectively, and she can set up boards where Chaos Lightning doesn't blow her out. I just don't think people are capitalizing on it, and I'll show you guys a list of the type of cards that I'm talking about that make her good. I also think that she could give Sarah a really hard time. It actually might really look something like this. Vraska, if they draw well enough, can definitely beat Jace, but I definitely get it more often with Jace than I don't. And I think Angrith can probably close the game out just because they're more burny and more sneaky. But I definitely think Vraska has the ability to shut down Domri and Rawl. It's just that I haven't seen it. Domri's probably going to be harder because they can keep refueling, but I know she's a good matchup against Rawl. But like I said, people just haven't gotten the list right, I don't think. Okay, so what do I think is worse than these? I think Sorin is definitely worse than everything so far. Sorin is good, but I don't think he's as good as anything above here. And he has a very small window to close the game against Sarah because she constantly heals herself. Liliana is really, really tricky because I think she's good. And also she has like two main styles right now. So she has like a mid-range beat style with Relentless Creatures like always. And now she has this combo cheese that I'm not sure how good it really is. That could end up shooting her in the S tier if it got optimized perfectly, or like one more card comes out that just completely breaks it. I think blue has a fantastic matchup against Liliana because they have bounce effects and they have transform effects like Shell Game. So that's why I think Teferi and Jace are definitely above it. I think if they stumble, I think Angrith smokes it. I think Rawl smokes it almost all the time, no matter what. And I think Rawl smokes it most of the time. I mean, Domri, excuse me. Also, Vraska probably has a better matchup over it because they have Turn to Stone and a lot of removal. But I do think it's really close. I think they definitely cheese out against Sarah most of the time. So it's really hard to say. Like, Liliana could go in A, but I'm going to keep her probably all the way left because I'm not really sure where she belongs yet. But she's definitely strong. I had to check to make sure I was recording and everything was going well because I didn't want to talk for like 30 minutes and then be like, oh, it sounds bad or something. But I didn't mean signature spell with Jace. I meant the wizard class spells. When they get milled, you can play them to continue with the game plan. Now, the next few I'm going to point out are kind of all in the same bracket, and they all kind of do the same thing. So this is how I feel about like Nahiri, Kaya, Ajani, Vivian, probably just those. So those are all pretty much the same. They all have, I think Kaya might be better than Ajani actually, and probably Kaya is probably better than Vivian, Ajani, and Nahiri. And so I think it looks something like this. Okay, so Kaya, I think, is a little bit better than the other options because she refuels herself. She has a lot more sneak. She has a little bit of more combat tricks and things like that. Ajani's probably like right here, honestly. So her and Ajani are probably really interchangeable. They both would get completely hosed by Vivian, I think. I beat them all the time with Jace and Teferi. I think Rawl smokes them almost every time. I think Domri smokes them almost every time. Angrith is probably more of a toss-up between Kaya, Ajani, and Angrith. But the problem with both of those is I've seen Sarah decks that run Day of Judgment that hoses Ajani really badly. And then the damage that Kaya does gets mitigated a lot by Sarah. But Kaya might be better than Sarah, but they're really, really close. So I'm going to keep those two all the way to the left of B because I think they have the most potential. And I think the right list, they could go up higher. I think it's hard for Sorin to deal with Ajani's beefiness. I think it would be hard for Sorin to deal with some Liliana decks, especially the cheese versions, because he doesn't have any removal that would deal with like the giant relentless thing. Not sure about Nahiri. I'm not sure where she belongs. She's probably better than Vivian, but I don't know. Like, I haven't seen much Vivian this entire meta, so it's really hard for me to say. But I think the B tier list looks something like this order. I think this is pretty close. Like, these two are probably interchangeable. I think this is really close to accurate. And now I'm a little bit partial to Chandra. I think Chandra's definitely in B. I don't know where exactly in B, but I beat all these other lists with Chandra very consistently. And a lot of it has to do with Lava Axe and Chandra's ability at the beginning, basically dealing 9 damage. So, and if any of these decks ever falter for a single turn, Chandra wins. So, I don't know. I don't think Chandra beats Sarah because she constantly heals herself. Chandra does not beat Vraska because of the removal, because of life gain if they have Soul of the Woods and Drain Blood and stuff like that. Chandra can take it from Jace, but I think I usually win with my Jace, especially with the list I've been tweaking pretty much the whole season, which again, I'm going to show you guys why it's tweaked the way that it's tweaked. I think Angrith is just a better Chandra right now, same with Domri. I think if Rawl gets a thing in the ice or a Mizium monstrosity that gets really big early, Chandra can't get over it because they don't run any just like pure removal, at least not most of the time. And if they do, they very well cannot see it. And so those are the things that kind of shuts it out. I think Chandra like almost auto loses against Teferi, well, at least the way that Teferi should be built. So I'm confident Chandra beats everything lower than her, and I'm confident it loses to everything above. So Chandra, I think that's about where she needs to be. Gideon is probably better than Chandra, and I think Gideon belongs here. So I think Gideon is worse than everything above and better than everything below. Gideon's nerf from the spawning thing going down a defense and from himself becoming a 3/3 has helped out control so much. I used to sweat bullets when I would play control and versus Gideon. It doesn't happen to me anymore, and that's because the turtle can just straight tank Gideon now. Like basically you just trade into the whole thing better, and then when they Paragon, most of the time they don't have a bunch of 3/3s. They have a lot of like smaller things. Now there are still like the Thraven Sentry that becomes a 3/3 with armor, the Paladin that still becomes a 3/3 with armor, stuff like that, but they don't go as hard as often, and it's just the little bit of a break control needed to get it the majority of the time. I still think Gideon's really good. I just don't think he's quite as good as before. I slapped up a bunch of Gideons with Rawl on the way up. I think Domri is just gonna basically always beat Gideon now because the slight reduction in speed, and Domri is just gonna continue to have blockers until the end of time. But I do think Gideon has a good matchup against everything lower. I could see a Johnny being a problem for Gideon because a Johnny gets a little bit thick. Probably the same thing with Vivian too, to be honest. I'm not really sure. I haven't seen enough interaction. I played Gideon a few times just for fun. I played with him a little bit yesterday in Mythic, just messing around. I went 1-1 with him. But Gideon's definitely strong still, but definitely not as strong as before. But like I said, I definitely don't think Gideon's good enough to be an S or A tier, especially because I think if you tune Vraska for the meta, you also put in Infest with the Drain Bloods, with the Turnstone, with the Flagrant Fouls, all that sort of stuff. And then Sarah just runs a bunch of creatures and she's constantly healing herself, so the window's going to close. I think Gideon could beat Angrith, though. So maybe not I think Gideon loses to everything in A and S besides maybe Angrith sometimes. So I kind of like where he's at. And then Nissa is very strange. I don't think Nissa belongs where Ashiok is, but I think Nissa belongs like somewhere in the middle of B. I'm not sure how good her OTK is anymore. It's a real problem because anytime Nissa is good, then the meta just kind of adds a few cards in their repertoire for it. And then also the fact that a lot of Teferi lists are running the Sphinx now, and they're running the 2-drop flyer that drafts traps and the staff drafts traps. So if they ever see Resilient Sphere, that just shuts out the combo, because usually the only legendary they run is the 10-drop. I think Nissa does well against most creature decks because she just herself has a bunch of creatures, but I could see the flyers from Sarah beating it. I could see even like the discard from Vraska, like with the Steed popping off twice, messing up Nissa pretty badly. I never lose to Nissa with Jace or Teferi. I don't think Nissa can hold back the aggression from Chandra and Gideon and Angrith consistently. I think Rawl has way too big turns to deal with Nissa. I think I beat all the Nissas I versed with Rawl on the way up at the very end there. And I don't think I lost to a Nissa with Jace. It might have maybe won the whole season, but I don't think so. So I think she belongs somewhere in there. Unfortunately, not that I mind too much because I hate Dritz. This tier list was just for Magic's Planeswalkers, but if I had a little icon for Dritz, he'd probably be an A tier because I think he's still really good. Unfortunately, I think the lines that he has are just really strong. I think he's a little underrepresented. I think if people put more time into Dritz, I think he'd be an A, or if not A, he'd be at the very top of B. So that's my tier list. I think there's wiggle room for everybody. I think if lists were geared towards the meta, geared towards basically just like maximum performance, I think that they could be shifted around. And like I said, it's not that Ashiok can't beat all these guys. I just find Ashiok very underwhelming right now. And there's definitely a lot of crossover, and the difference between S and B is not huge, which is why I'm enjoying this meta a lot, because the power difference is not the really like half tier differences between the tiers. Like the difference between S and A is just not a lot, and the difference between S and B is just not a lot, which is a good sign of a healthy meta. So now I'm going to transition to the actual Spellslinger app, and I'm going to show you guys some lists and what you should be expecting from maybe like the top 5 or 6 decks or so. All right, now we're in the in-game client here, not on our tier list maker. And so I'm just going to show you guys a couple of lists here. These aren't like, these aren't from some kind of website. These are just things that I was messing with. This is the Domri list I played the other day. So when you play against Domri, you need to keep in mind that these Birds of Paradise and these Agitators are looking towards playing the Craterhoof Behemoth. So this is like their big blowout. This is what you need to think about the entire game, how far away they are from this card, what their board state is, how powerful this card would be, and you need to think about that while you're making trades. If you think that they have it and you know it's coming up so you don't get blown out. And then also you need to keep track of how many of these they have in their hand, because they're going to be 1/4s with haste after this is played. So that's a really big deal. If you're playing control, you need to constantly be thinking about, if I board wipe, is this and this just going to kill me? Do I have enough blockers to survive? Sometimes you'll be forced to board wipe anyway. You need to be constantly thinking about the Worm's Wake that could be there when they pass, because they're going to pass with 2 or more mana a lot of the times because of all of the stupid werewolves. And so having mana in reserve is not going to be unusual. And so just keep in mind, it's not always just a flip. The Worm's Wake is going to come. Keep in your mind about the Giant Growth or any of the other traps that they could be having. So those are the things that you need to look out for when you play against Domri. But this is the biggest deal, right? Okay, now I'm going to show you the Raw stock list that I have been, it's titled Best Deck for a reason. So this is the Raw stock list I've seen on Discord. Several people have posted this exact list and shown me this exact list. So there's nothing, unique or special about it. But this is the stock list, so you need to familiarize yourself with it. So this is the card, one of the new cards that's pushing it over the top. Each player mills a card, then draws a card. You don't really care about giving your opponent a card, which is, normally blasphemous to me. But the reason why you're able to get away with it is because Rawl's ability allows you to cheat stuff out. So while you're maybe giving them a card, you're able to just take that one card so much further than they are, and it's, going to end in their death pretty soon. Warding Flame is another one of just the big boons to the deck. So at first it doesn't look like it's that big of a deal, but trust me, when you play with it, It's really good. Deal 1 damage to an enemy. Miracle, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. So this hits face twice. That's cool. If it hits a creature in face, yada yada, you get it. But that's not the real benefit. The real benefit is this number right here. And see how it says 1? That means it's really good for comboing off. And the fact that it does damage is just extra gravy. And also it helps you clear creatures on the board to continue to go face with your huge Thing in the Ice and your huge Mizium monstrosities. Okay, and then the other 1-drop spell that's really good is Burn Through. So deal 1 damage to an enemy creature. Give it can't block this turn. So again, that's another way to get these big punches through with your Thing in the Ice and your big punches through with your Mizium monstrosities. And then the other thing that all these cheap 1-drop cards do is make Young Pyromancer really crazy, because you just make like 4 of these very easily anytime you play a Pyromancer out, and it just makes it really, really hard to deal with. So the ways that you can handle Raw, or try to handle Raw is a better way of saying it, is to have really wide, thick boards, so that way this isn't as harmful to you, and then to run a ton of removal, so you can deal with this, so you can deal with this guy, and some hard removal, so you can deal with the Awakened Heart. With hard removal, I mean like Shell Games, Fouls, Path of Exile, stuff like that. And then also if you're running blue, then you need to run Negates, Absorbs, things like that to try and slow them down. So those are things that you can just keep in mind. You need to always think about this card in the back of your mind, always. Okay, and let's see. So we all know what Teferi does. I don't really feel a need to go into that. Let me show you what I think a good Vraska list would look like in this meta. So I think Circle the Druid would be a really good way of slowing things down and healing some life with the Brontosaurus, and not being so vulnerable to things like Chaos Lightning. It'll help you stabilize against Domri and so on. Infectious Scorpion just gives you a bunch of removal. In this version, see, I'm running like the Elvish Archer because it's a 2/4, so it's a great shock absorber for Chaos Lightning. I'm running Soul of the Wood in this version because I like to heal and stabilize against things like Rawl, against things like Angrith, and so on, Domri. Infest to just wipe out all these wide-going creature decks. Hoses Domri, kills all the boars unless they've been buffed. Deals with Young Pyromancer, stuff like that. Stag to Fights, Turn to Stone, the Brawling Behemoth. So you can see I was working towards a deck, even titled it Control, where I'm basically trying to skew my deck to beat these better decks. I even put Steed in here so I could slow down Rawls and stuff like that from the double discard. So this is the kind of direction I think Vraska needs to go in order to be competitive in today's meta. I think we all know what Sarah does. There's nothing really particularly special. Just look out for the Chalice and for Mend, because it's a 2-mana deal 5 to you after they Chalice. So, you know, you could get screwed if they hold a couple of them for the end of the game. And to finish this video off, I'm just going to show you the Jace list that I was working on for a long time. This is what I was working on pretty much the entire meta, and it gave me so many headaches, but I'm glad I put in the time. I tried Tolarian Academy for a while, and just when it would trigger too early, it just ended the game against, you know, like the Domries and the Rawls and stuff. It just ruined the curve. So I just ended up taking it out, but I wanted to keep the Alarm Bell in, and the Alarm Bell helps me find the Snapcasters, which is really important. It helps me find the Crabs, obviously, against early aggression. And I added these in because they're 2-drop 2/4. So as you guys used to know, or knew from before, I played Lore Keepers a lot, but the 2/1 just was not getting it done. You needed some more booty meat. Let's see. What are the other important things? That's really it. It's just the Snapcaster count, getting the land right, changing some of the creatures, and trying to see. There are a lot of versions I had with Alarm Bell, a lot of versions I didn't have with Alarm Bell, to see if it was worth it. But every single card just really mattered. But this is the list that I ended up getting to like 1850 with. Just the games would take a long time, and that's why I switched to Rawl to just, you know, basically sprint the last lap, right? But yeah, it's a very good control list. It has legs against everything. I occasionally beat Domri with it. You can beat Raw. It's not, Raw's probably the hardest matchup for it. I lost to like 1 or 2 Teferis all season. Sarah is free, like free. And then against other aggressive decks, it's just a lot better now than it ever has been. And the fact that Gideon got nerfed really helps, because Gideon was a problem before, but I don't lose to Gideon with this deck anymore. So those are the decks that I wanted to show you guys, what to expect, what to look out for. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you guys enjoyed my insight, the tier list, the deck lists. Please, if you liked it, leave a comment, leave a like. I really appreciate it. I'm over 900 subs now. I'm like super thrilled by that. I'm gonna be checking my sub count like every 5 minutes, because I really just can't wait to get to 1,000. You guys are awesome. Thanks for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.